the exercise.
All right. It's 6:30, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Will we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone to our December 21st Select Board meeting. All the folks present here and the ones joining us on Zoom. Two of our Select Board members are attending on Zoom, Lee Dakin and Heather Chase, and the rest are here in person. The first item on our agenda is to approve our minutes from our December 7th Select Board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Heather is the motion and Lee is the second on it. Are any changes, corrections, omissions, errors, anything on the December 7th minutes?
Not at this time.
I did not find any.
I had a couple of questions. So under the list of visitors present, I don't think it includes everybody who was here or online, because on page 4, line 25, a gentleman named Rich Coombs is listed as speaking, and he's not in that list of people who are present. So I don't know if it matters. I'm not sure how we keep track of who's here and who isn't, but I just thought I'd point that out.
Well, we can add him to the list of the
Yeah,
folks.
and
he definitely spoke here. He was here.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if there are other people who were here who are also not listed, but I'm not sure whether it matters, number one, and how we keep track of people who are here or not.
It does matter.
Okay.
Usually I keep a list, and he must not have been on the list that I sent to Susan.
Okay.
I must have missed him. Yeah.
And sometimes we struggle with the names that come up on Zoom because they're just phone numbers or just first names and stuff, and we ask people to identify themselves.
Right.
And we try to have a comprehensive list that's correct, so we'll do the best we can. So we'll put that correction in there. Anything else?
That was all I had.
All those in favor of approving the minutes as amended, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? No. Next item on our agenda is citizens' comments. If there's someone here that would like to address the board regarding issues that are not on the agenda, now would be the time to do so. Are there any citizens' comments? I don't see anybody with a hand up there.
Excuse me, Arnie. There are two Johns on the on Zoom. One of them has a last name, the other one does not. I asked the other one in chat, and they have not answered.
All right, thank you, Sue. Any citizens' comments? Hearing none, we'll go on to old business. Julie, can you take us through our old business list?
I can. Just a few things. So the police chief change of command ceremony, I think went very well. We had very good attendance. Rick is now officially retired from Chester PD, and Tom is officially our chief, Tom Williams. And now that Tom is in place and has 5 days under him, we're going to start working on, he's got some ideas for the Police Advisory Committee, so that will be starting, we'll be starting that work. I know there have been some people that have been anxious to get that going. So Tom and I are having some discussions. I'm going to update some of the research that I had done previously. We're going to look for some models from towns where it has been successful. There are several towns where it has not been. So we want to make sure whatever model we're using is has been proven and is a good model for Chester. So we'll be hoping to present something and start that discussion at the second meeting in January. Budget will be pretty much wrapped up, and we should be able to begin that discussion.
Julie, can you just remind me of the purpose?
That's going to be part of your discussion. So there's been, community members and the board has talked in the past about whether or not it feels that a police advisory committee is good for Chester. Tom and I both see value in it, in that it's a sounding board it's a liaison between the citizens and the police department, where sometimes that can be a little difficult. They can be used for data mining. They can be used for communication between the two, improving community policing. There's a lot of places that it can be used. Where it gets confused and will not be used because statute doesn't authorize it, is in any form of oversight over the police department. So they will not be, part of a discipline process for an officer. Statute just doesn't authorize that. That is the role of the town manager, and then the select board should it get to that point. So are ways that they can be used as far as advisory. And so those are some of the things that Tom is thinking about. He'd love to get a restorative justice program going in Chester. And that is an area where citizen advisory can be utilized and be helpful. So he's kind of putting his thoughts around what he would like its role to be. And then we'll present to the board just different thoughts. And then I think it's up to the board to decide if you feel that it's beneficial to the community.
I would think on a process like that, I realize that Tom's going to be a big part of it, being the chief and stuff, but maybe it might be a good idea to get people involved with it earlier, citizens, to see what it's going to be formed
Absolutely. All we're going to be bringing to you are just his thoughts and models of what other towns have done. From there, the board can decide whatever process. This is a board committee. It's not my committee or the police department's committee. It is a committee appointed by the select board. But we have had several people ask me, why are you even doing that? What is the role? So I've asked Tom to put his thoughts around how he feels it could be beneficial to the police department. The police department is not against an advisory committee. He can see benefits to it. So we're just going to present it with that, and then the board can take it whatever direction you want as far as community input. I mean, there should definitely be a public process, Arnie, I agree. Yeah. I agree. I'm just going to come to you with, there's a lot out there of where town examples from other towns are being used, and they're not successful. They've had legal issues. There have been other issues with other towns. So we want to come to you with different models of towns that have been successful, because there are several in Vermont that are successful. And then the board can take it whatever direction you want.
Yeah, I think a lot of our ideas when we were first talking about this is to get community involvement in the police department, to make sure there's some communication to help with that part of it. And as far as the image of the police department and the townspeople, so that there's a connection between the two. And those were the discussions that I remember in the past that we've had over it and stuff. And I realized that the oversight wasn't the direction that we were heading. And you were saying that there was some legal part to it, but some towns do it that way. I mean, Bennington had their trouble and did do it through that process. It's not that it's not possible. It's just something that we don't seem like, as a town, that we want to
Citizen
pursue in that
oversight, there's not
direction.
authority in statute for it. Bennington got challenged on their committee.
Yeah.
So their committee is not one that you want to model because it's
Oh,
not
no,
legal.
no, but it is out there. I'm,
Yeah,
I'm just stating.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the biggest thing that I've seen over the past couple of years is communication, and how the more communication, the better. And I see this panel as some means of communicating between the community and the police force, and everybody from that standpoint, because we really don't have, well, there's a couple of issues. One is we're not really good at getting our message out, and I'm not picking on anybody, but no matter who it is, what group you are, whatever, it's really hard to get your message out. Number two, people are too distracted and not paying attention, so it's kind of a two-way street. But I see this as an opportunity for us to have that, another line of communication that will help.
Absolutely.
So that'll be coming up in, I believe, our second meeting in
Yeah,
January. as
it just
far
gives
as
us time to gather some stuff for you guys to look
Because
at. And
I have had people in the community come forward and are willing to volunteer
yes,
for positions on that advisory.
yeah,
Make sure I get the right words, advisory committee and stuff. And like you were saying, the communication, just to get it out there. And our new chief did talk about it during the interviews that we had with him.
He sees
And
great
thought
value in it.
He thought it was a great idea and a good process and a good vehicle to get the community involvement in everything that happens in the police department. So where are we? Old business?
yeah, oh, sorry, okay. Continuing the police department, the union agreement, the agreement has now been, full agreement has now been presented to the local. They'll be voting on it, I believe, this week. So hopefully that, once that is voted by them, I'll bring the full thing to the select board, and you guys can have your discussion, your process, and so I'm hoping that that will be on the January 4th meeting.
Okay.
Yosemite, town was awarded the Historic Preservation Grant that will pay $20,000 towards the renovation of the windows and doors at the Yosemite Firehouse, which is great. And keeping in line with grant awards, we did receive if you recall, we wrote a grant for the Park and Ride down on Cobley to pave that. That was awarded as well, $48,000. So that will pay to regrade and then pave the Cobley Street parking area, which in turn will be the overflow parking from the green. Yep. The Academy building, so the snow guards for the Academy building have been ordered. Hoping that those will be going up soon. And then wastewater management plan, if you recall, we had, Naomi was here a few meetings ago. The application for the wastewater asset management plan was approved and accepted. So if you recall, the total cost is $78,000. So the town was awarded 50% subsidy, so a $39,000 grant in essence for that. And the applications have now opened up for the lead line inventory. Chester is in place to receive 100% funding to inventory any remaining lead lines that we have in Chester. That application has finally been released, so that'll be coming to you soon for signature as well.
The asset management, is
Yep.
that for just inventory or is that for condition of things also to prioritize?
That's much like we did for the water, when Naomi did the water. This is prioritized, and this is also going to give us the report that we need for the force main along Depot. Yeah.
Well, it's important things to have when come issues. Anything
all.
else on old business?
That's all I have.
Anybody on the board have any old business?
Not at this time, Arnie.
Okay. So we'll move on. The next item on our agenda is Chester Community Garden, the lease agreement. Everybody in there got in their packet. It's not a lease.
It's a license.
I guess it's a license.
Yeah.
And when we first were talking about this, I thought it was going to be something like a simple lease or a simple document. It's far from that.
It's simpler than a lease.
It's got a lot of legalese in it. I mean, I had a hard time understanding some of the conditions and some of the things that are in here. I just sometimes wonder how we got to the point of having something of this depth for a simple project like we have.
I think that anytime the town allows use of its property, it has to be fully protected, and there has to be an agreement between both parties. And while I agree this is a lot more complicated than I thought it was going to be, I think we need to have this as a springboard to start the discussion about what we need, because we don't know what's going to happen down the road. All kinds of unforeseen things happen, and if we don't have something in place, then the town is open to liability. So I understand where you're coming from, certainly, but to answer your question that you were asking, I think this is something that's necessary. I do have a couple of questions about it that I don't know if it'll add clarity or not, but.
Well, I also have some questions on it as we were going through it, some of the conditions, because it was drawn up to protect both parties, but it's definitely one-sided on the town side. And I understand that we're here to protect the town's interests and things.
Right.
But we also have letters of support for the community greenhouse. And it seems like this document is going to make it extremely difficult to accomplish anything on their end of the
Well, why do you think
spectrum.
that?
Why?
Yeah.
Because basically, we could turn around at any time and turn around and say you're off the property for no reason whatsoever.
Well,
That's one of the
there was
conditions
one
in it.
clause in there that said we had 186 days, we could write written notice, and 186 days later. But I think there's a process in there that would allow the licensee to talk to us and have those discussions. And yeah, I understand that it's going to be one-sided in looking at how do we best protect the town's interests. But in reality, I'm not sure that I would be satisfied with anything less than this, specifically for a structure as important and as cumbersome, I guess, for lack of a better word, as a greenhouse. You know, a 130-foot-long greenhouse on town property that has any number of potential liabilities associated with it. I think we need to be sure that we're acting in a.
And I would totally agree with you when you get to the point of the greenhouse. This is for community
Right.
gardens at this point. And
Right.
They realize that if there's anything to do with a permanent structure like a greenhouse, it would be a whole different process.
Right.
And I just wish we had consistency on how we deal with the greenhouse committee as we do with Chester Townscape or other organizations that do use some of the land in Chester without any agreements whatsoever, and they're 501Cs also. So I just wondered, do we have the same process for everybody, or is there a different process just for this group?
I'm not familiar with the Chester Townscape and what they use, other than they're the ones that put the
flowers.
flowers and
Flower
stuff
pots.
up.
It's the flower pots.
Okay.
And these folks want to put gardens, vegetable gardens in different parts of town.
Right, but that's a little bit more permanent than putting flower boxes on bridges and elsewhere around town, I think. I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding what it is that they do and what the actual impact would be on the town-owned property.
Pretty much the same as this one would be, but I guess we can go through this list.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
absolutely.
the purpose of it at this point. I just had some questions because it seems like we're handling different organizations differently, and I would like to have some consistency in how we deal with things.
Sure, yeah, that makes
just to
sense.
make sure it's fair.
Well, and any other leased property that we have has agreements. So Chester Historical Society has a month-to-month lease going at this time.
They have a lease?
That lease that was in place is a month-to-month at this point. We are revisiting it.
The lease
We're revisiting the lease.
that one-page lease that has like
Correct.
3 sentences
That's
on it?
going to be something that's going to be looked at again
No,
because,
and I realize why, because that is,
because with the reason we didn't renew that lease.
because it is what it is. Yeah.
Because it is what it is, and because there's yet to be a discussion about the future use of the building. But we are on a month to month at this point with them, so.
Well, I wonder, may I speak?
Go ahead, Lee.
Well, I'm just wondering, I mean, I've read this thoroughly, and it seems to me, rather than calling it a lease, it's a license agreement.
It is a
And
license, correct.
I think what I'm hopeful, I don't know what's going on with this, that this indicates clearly that, you know, the use of town property is one thing, but the other part of this is the liability if someone gets hurt, or, I mean, this is what the license is all about, that I can tell. For whatever reason, it's a revocable license to use the licensed area for operation and use in the Chester Community Garden, for use by all Chester residents. So I think this is well worded, the real property license agreement, and I was glad to see that.
Arnie,
Yes, go ahead.
I can't see the audience, but I mean, is there any problem from the group when they look at this?
Good question.
I would think that the group is going to, and I guess Cheryl Joy Lipton is here, is probably going to want to have an attorney look at this to see exactly what it does mean or doesn't mean, and is it conducive for what they're trying to achieve. And Cheryl, if you'd
Well,
like to.
in that case, maybe they need to take some time to do that. When I read it over, what jumped out at me is they need insurance. So the two things that I think need to go forward, and we've spent a great deal of time on this, and I'm certainly supportive of it, but A, can they show evidence of insuring it? And B, are they happy with the terms? Because this is what our attorney has suggested, so I'm yielding to counsel that this is what we need in 2020, almost 3, which is unfortunate, but that's where we are. So if, I think we should, you know, hear some about it, but these discussions have been really lengthy in the past, and I think at this point we need to know I need to know two things. One, A, they're going to be able to get insurance. And if so, I think we need to see documentation of that. And if they're going to have a lawyer, which I would certainly think that they should, review it, what are their questions or concerns?
Thank you, Heather.
Can I make a comment, Arnie? I'm not disagreeing with Heather, but I think that right now the conversation is with us, not necessarily getting the greenhouse committee or the garden committee's input on it, because we haven't even had a chance to look at it. So I think before we start asking for input from other people, I think we need to have that discussion. And I think that's where we were started to go. Arnie, you were saying we were going to go through it.
Yeah.
Which I think makes more sense. And Heather, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I just don't want to get too far down the road before we've had a chance to.
No, I don't mind going through it, but I don't see how this board can disagree with, in my view, our legal counsel has recommended this, and he has reasons to have recommended this. So I'm fine with going through it, but I'm not going to argue with our attorney at this point.
Well, and to that point, legal counsel is exactly what you said, a recommendation. There are towns in this state that absolutely have no document at all and have community gardens, and then they have towns that have strict leases with a lot of verbiage and a lot of legal stuff in it too. So there's a range of how this could be handled. This is the recommendation of our town attorney, and that's what it is, a recommendation, and we decide as a board whether we want to take that recommendation or do something different. But I think going through it, so Cheryl, we'll hold off on any questions from your group right now and let your folks digest it, see what's going on. I don't know when you got it. We just got this for this package recently. Some of us have gone through it, and there are some questions that we have on our end also. So I imagine the same thing would be happening on your end too.
We got, Julie, you will be the one who can tell whether we got it at the same time
You
or
got
not.
it at the same time that the board did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Chester Community Greenhouse and Gardens did go over it. We thought that and we do have questions and concerns about various spots, but we're not really wanting to talk about that with you all until we thought that tonight you probably would discuss it and maybe have suggestions about changing various things, and then whatever you come up with, we will take then with us to our lawyer and then have them look over it. So we're not going to have ours look over it until you people the select board is finished, with your comments on it, because it might change. So why do it that way? So we'll wait until you guys are able to discuss it. And so tonight would be great.
So I think that's a good process. We'll do what we have to do on our side, like Lee was saying, you do what you have to do on your side, and we'll try to work this out till we get to an agreement that's acceptable to both sides to try to get this project to go forward. That makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can just go through it quickly. Any questions that come up? It's a real property license agreement. The first section just describes what the groups are involved. License and use. As I go through the pages, any questions, any concerns at this point? The fees, the numbers were put in there by the attorney just as placeholders, as dollar amounts, so we, whether we accept those or have our own. The term.
So that's where I had my first question.
On the term?
Under 3A and B, licensee has a right to terminate this license for any reason with 90-day notice, and we have 30 days notice, and I'm not sure that that's fair. I think we should both have the same amount of time. So I would suggest either they have 30 days and we have 30 days, or they have 90, we have 90, unless there's a good reason for having that difference.
I don't know. Good question. I'm not sure why the difference would be there.
The other question was, why 186 instead of 180? Must be some legal
It's
reason.
probably half a year.
Yeah.
It sounds
It's
to
half of
me like
300.
it's growing season.
It's exactly half a year. Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, well, the first one makes sense because it's failure to comply with some terms of it. The second one basically gives the town the right to cancel it no matter what, for no reason whatsoever. That's a strong point. And that's the one that I was a little leery about. I understand the reasoning behind it to protect the town, but it also puts the group at jeopardy of basically not having much security as far as going forward with anything that they might want to do there, because 186 days from a notice, that'd be it. But those are just a couple of the questions that we've had on that part.
Well, and I think, Arnie, that the termination is if the licensee fails to comply with the terms and conditions
Yeah, that's
of the
the
lease.
first part.
Right.
That's the 30 days.
It's not for any reason. It's
Yeah.
if they're not in compliance with the lease.
No, the other one says for any reason, C.
Oh,
terms.
I'm sorry. I was focused on B.
No, B, I understand
Yeah,
B.
okay.
C says for any reason. For 186 days, we give you notice and that's it.
I think if we had something that came up urgent with property and we needed to do something with it, that gives you that opportunity, but also gives them ample time to take care of their property.
But I would think that the time for that would be at the term's lease, at the end, if it's a year or 3 years or whatever, because basically why have a 3-year lease or a 2-year lease when it actually is a 186-day lease?
And I know we're all kind of lost on it, but license.
License, lease, yeah, they're similar. I guess there is a difference on it. The lease carries more weight, but this is a license just to use the land. But those are some of the questions I had on it. Anything else as we go along? That's the term part of it. Maintenance and alterations.
So under notices, sorry.
Yep.
it just says, shall be deemed served upon mailing, said, no, I would think we would want to have some kind of a, what do you call it, registered mail or a receipt or something that says we mailed it, otherwise who's to prove that we actually mailed something or whatever. I would think we'd want to include some registered mail language in there.
Anything else on notices? Maintenance and alterations. I guess that's just so basically we can keep track of what's happening on the property. Because what it says is you can't do anything without prior written consent. I mean, and it says it can't be reasonably withheld, but basically whatever you do, there has to have written consent on top of this lease.
Well, I think that makes sense because we've seen what happens, and I'm not saying within the town of Chester, but there are multiple times where somebody has said, oh yeah, we'll maintain the property, and then it goes all to pot. So I think that that's reasonable language to have in there. I think there's enough coverage of both sides that we have the option of saying what we like or don't like, and vice versa. I don't think there's anything in there that would be too constraining.
Yep, I understand. Access to licensed area by others, taxes, assessments, and other charges. There are no taxes involved in this property, though. No. Utilities. I don't imagine they have use for any utilities. The only one I would think about they might be needing is water, which would be nice since there's a pump house there and stuff. And so is that going to be on them for the water? Because
That's up to you. I mean, if you want the town to provide that, then we can change that language.
Okay.
Are
What
we
does the
able
rest
to
of the board
use,
feel?
would that water be able to be used for gardening without some kind of treatment? I mean, it's a boil water if we use that well, right?
Correct.
I mean, I don't see why we would have to require, or that would be required, but just whoever, I don't know, is it the user beware that there might be E. coli in this water? What, I don't know. I think that's a question that,
We talked to the water department about.
right,
To see if there's a way to facilitate getting water to that area. I mean, I've seen places where there's not, excuse me, winter use of water where they just put a little spigot on a hydrant and it works fine just to get some water to do what they
Right.
have to do. But
yeah, I don't know enough about that well, whether we'd have to actually turn the well on or just, like you said, open a spigot and water comes out because it's pressurized from the other end.
I guess we could ask the water department
Yeah.
on that. and
Because
give
it
us some information.
could be fairly expensive to fire that well up once a week.
Well, no,
Or
if it's
once-
going to involve some serious money and stuff,
Yeah.
then that raises a whole bunch of new questions and stuff.
Right.
But hopefully it's something that's relatively simple and inexpensive to help facilitate what they got to do.
Yeah.
I mean, pump house and a hydrant and a well sit there and then say, sorry, we can't give you water.
Well, the hydrants, I think these are all Jeff questions, so.
Yeah, yeah. It's not like in the city where they used to put the sprinklers on the hydrants and let the kids go wild every once in a while in the summer. The thing was just spinning around and stuff. Utilities, is that it? Assignment and sub-licensing, I understand that. No representation, nature of licensed area. Chester does not have any obligation to perform any work or otherwise prepare the area for the use for what they're going to be doing. The only question I had on that is, are we going to do anything about the driveway that's shared right now because the property line goes right through it? Are we going to distinguish between the two properties, or are we just going to leave it the way it was? Because I don't want the folks that are living there also to be burdened with cars going around and around because they're using the area there too. I want to make sure, I would think that the folks that are abutting it are protected. So maybe there's something that we want to look at on that.
Well, I was thinking about that when I was looking at the survey map, that half of the road, quote unquote, is on somebody else's
The
property.
turnaround.
Yeah. So I'm wondering whether reconfiguring that to keep that entire turnaround on town property would be a reasonable step, just to prevent any potential conflicts. I mean, it's not like we don't have the room to do it.
No, yeah. And it was just to separate the two.
Right.
At the same time, this does not say that we shall not. It just says that we don't have any obligation.
That's true. Yeah. So it leaves the door open if we decide that we would like to help them out or do what we can, but you're right. Repairs, alterations, that makes sense. Indemnity. And then there's a bunch of legalese about suits. Insurance. That's going to be on the licensee.
My question on this one is,
On the insurance?
this asks for a $2 million policy. Everything that I see is 1 million.
I was just going to say the same
Everything
thing.
we have on everything else is a $1 million policy. So I think, I mean, that's what we have for everything. So I don't know
Keep
that
it
2 million
consistent
is not, right.
I was
So
gonna say
I
the
think
same
that
thing.
could be a 1.
Yep, I agree.
Well, that would help them out on their end, too.
Yeah, well, everything else is a $1 million policy. I haven't seen $2 million
Although
policies.
I have to admit that when I started my business and took out an insurance policy for $1 million, I was amazed at how little it cost. I mean, not that it's insignificant,
No,
but
it's
it's
a
just
cost,
like,
but, yeah.
I was thinking, $1 million, that must cost a lot of money, but
Legalized gambling. Risk of loss. Conformity with law and safety, pretty self-explanatory. Independent capacity, non-discrimination against persons with disabilities. Amendments, serverability, waiver, effect on successors and assigns, entire agreement. If there's any questions as I'm going through, yeah, just some of this stuff I don't even understand it, but execution and counterparts, non-exclusive. That says that we could still use that land for things that we might want to,
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
that's important, because we
Yeah.
learned our lesson on the other one.
yeah,
Yeah.
in case, for a weekend or a fair or something and stuff, we want to have some exhibits or something. And as long as it doesn't
Exactly.
interfere with
Absolutely.
Yeah. Governing laws, amendments, and liens, and the last signer page. So we had a few questions. Any other comments or questions or concerns regarding the lease from any select board members?
So what do you want on term, number 3? We talked about, you talked about C. What is the question there? Just if you want to do that, is there a question to go back to Jim? Is there,
That $10 fee?
no,
I think
C.
the question was actually on,
3C.
I think it was mainly also 3A and B of the, why is one 30-day and one 90-day?
Okay, so, okay.
Oh, yeah, to make them the same.
or if there's a good reason to keep them different, I just
Yeah.
was curious as to what that
An understanding of it.
reason might be.
Okay.
And Julie, I'd like you to ask him why the 2 million versus the 1.
Okay.
If there's a reason he,
He had that? Sure.
yeah.
Any other questions, Julie, on what we were talking about?
No, I think I got everything. Why the difference between the 2 terms? We'll add language about being registered, return receipt requested on notices. Utilities, I'll talk to Jeff about the water.
Water, yeah.
If that, and this is just, do we need to do something with delineating the driveway? I mean, that really is more a question for
Yeah.
yourselves. Do you want to do, you know what I mean?
Well, regardless of whether or not this land is used for
Right,
garden space, I think we should make that change.
right.
I'm not sure what it would cost us to do that.
I can talk to Kirby. Can we talk to Kirby about what would be involved in that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then how does that affect the landowner where the road goes through their property now? Is that going to mean we're going to change things on their property or whatever? I guess that's
Okay.
my question.
I think it would offer protection for them, I would think, if nothing else.
Right.
You know, it would set a boundary and a line that says, this is yours, no problem.
Right.
Here's your driveway, and
And then we are limited in liability if somebody's driving on a town road and happens to cross into their property and crash into their house, whatever, then I would think that would be a
And then I'll ask,
liability.
sorry. And then
No.
I'll ask Jim why 2 million?
yeah.
And there was one more I thought. Nope, that was it. That was it.
That was it?
That was the
So
questions.
the last thing I wanted to bring up is in the third paragraph of Jim's email. He talks about the difference between a license and a lease. And the last sentence I thought was interesting. Should something similar to this be acceptable, it's expected that CCG&C would propose a set of garden rules and a user agreement for those who are allocated spaces. So that's not anywhere in this license.
No,
but-
that would be a separate,
Would that be a separate agreement between the town and,
I think the agreement is between them and whoever is renting or using a plot. There would be some user agreement. That's what he's talking about.
right, no, I understand what it's asking for, I'm just wondering what our
It says,
liability or obligation would be under that kind of an arrangement?
well, it says that they will propose, and I'm assuming that means to you,
I
their
guess
own
that's-
set of rules for their users and a user agreement.
And I guess that's my question
Yeah.
is,
Is that to
is
be?
that really what's going to happen? Are we going to require that or ask for that, I guess?
The way it's worded, it seems like it's between the garden group and the people that are going to be using plots.
Right, and I understand that. I guess my question is, does that agreement between the user and the garden group have any impact on us?
I guess not unless we want it to.
Well,
And
I
why
guess
would
that's
they?
why I'm asking the question. Do we want it? Do we want to know or not?
Well, you know, we're getting to the point where they basically don't have many rights. We can kick them off the land anytime. We want them to help make all the rules. Why doesn't the town just run this?
No,
And that way, they don't even have to take out the insurance. We could just allow them the property to do it, plant a few gardens, and walk away from all this. I mean,
Well,
that's what we're getting down to. it
That's
seems.
certainly an option. I guess I wasn't proposing that we inject ourselves into their workings. I'm just,
No, but it's a good question.
yeah, I'm just wondering whether or not we have any specific obligations relative to that agreement between the users and the operators.
I will ask Jim.
Okay.
Well, considering that some towns don't have any agreement at all and some have a real formal lease, I guess we have options all
Right.
the way from nothing to overboard is what I think this is, but it's,
Okay.
I know, and I understand, we're protecting the town property, and that's a big thing. It's not to be taken lightly, but to what end sometimes I wonder. Any other questions or concerns about the lease, or? Well, we generated enough questions, I think.
Yeah.
We'll keep the lawyer busy for a while.
I will get answers.
All right, thank you.
Hopefully they'll be quickly.
And Cheryl, your group, get together, go over the lease, probably going to have to get counsel?
Yeah, so will you have these changes made that you all talked about, and then send me the edited version to bring to my,
I'll send you Jim's response to these questions so that you don't, once I have them, then you can have them and not have to necessarily wait. You know what I mean? We can kind of keep that dialogue open.
All right.
Yeah,
okay, so I will wait to get that before giving it to our attorney then.
that's up to you.
She's going to have to go get that and then come back to us with those answers.
Yeah,
So
So
that'll be,
she's saying that she would give you the response that we're going to get.
yeah.
And whether we agree on it or something changes, but at least you'll be up to speed about where we're going to be with the document, so.
But the other thing I could do, Cheryl Joy, because, I mean, as we have seen, attorneys get backed up, especially now. Everybody is very busy. So maybe I mean, if this were me, I might go ahead and send it to the town attorney. I can certainly send you a copy of the email that I sent to him with
That's
these
great.
questions, and then you can share that with your attorney as well.
Okay, that's terrific.
Then he knows what we're looking at. That
Good
might help
idea.
your process a little quicker, too.
We'll do that.
Okay.
By the way, the Chester Townscape, they have in-the-ground gardens also, like at least a few places, not
didn't
just
hear
in
any of
pots, on bridges.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
So are we going to have any more discussion on the canal survey map that was presented, or is that just for information relative to what we just discussed?
The map itself?
Yeah.
What was the question on the map, Lee?
I just wondering if we were going to have any more discussion, or I can close it. If we're not going to reference it.
If you have any questions on the map or anything?
I don't, yeah, but I didn't know if we were going to have a discussion about it.
I think there's still 2 pins to check out or something, but basically this is going to be the finished product.
And he emailed me today, Gary emailed me today, apparently there is a budding property owner, I don't know who, that has asked him to show him exactly where the pin is. There's a question on one of the boundaries. So is meeting with him this week, so that is out there as well.
That's
Seems
good.
like it's pretty set, though,
Yeah.
because it's based on 2 or 3 different surveys that have taken place, and there doesn't seem like there's much controversy on it. It explains everything. Yeah, when he does walk it, I'd love to.
Yes, he's going to
walk
get
it.
a hold of you. He has all your contact info. Yep.
I'm curious myself.
Yeah.
Can I get a copy of the map at regular scale so that,
You want this?
full
I've got
scale,
a notebook.
1 inch equals 50 feet, so I can work
I
with it
think I
with my
sent this to
scale.
you.
There's
I
a s-
know.
There's a scale on it, so you should be able to,
Did he give you a
Here.
big
Right.
copy?
I've got another copy. Sure.
And I did send you all copies of an agreement that we were working on and rules and regulations for the gardens, and also the timeline that you were talking about a while ago,
when did you send that, Cheryl? 'Cause-
just today. So
okay.
you'll have,
Oh,
you
okay.
you have it in your emails.
Oh, good, thank you.
Really in time for the packet, sorry about that.
Okay, yeah. When did you send it?
Just today, just I don't know, sometime today.
Okay.
So it was,
I've been right up on my emails. I haven't gotten anything from you.
oh,
Yeah, I haven't either,
really?
and I'm looking at
Haven't
my,
either.
Okay, maybe it didn't, I am having a problem with my internet, actually, so that might have happened. Sorry about that. Well, I will make sure it goes through.
I'll look for it, Cheryl Joy. If I don't get it, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the lease or the license? All set, we'll move on. Next item on our agenda is our statement of inclusion, declaration of inclusion. I know this has been brought up before with the select board, and we have talked about it. There's been a group of people in town that have been working very hard on this project and trying to do some of the wording as far as the declaration as it applies, as we would like to see it apply for Chester. I'd like to start off first by just reading the Declaration of Inclusion, the way it is formed by the committee. And it is recognizing that diversity strengthens and enriches a community. The town of Chester condemns all forms of discrimination and bigotry. We strongly commit ourselves and our institutions to the fair and equal treatment of everyone, including members of traditionally marginalized groups who live, work, or pass through our community. We strive to ensure that all our plans, policies, programs, procedures, statements, and actions reflect these commitments and support a community in which all persons feel welcome and safe to express their opinions, engage in the community. When I read a statement like that, I think a lot of it is core beliefs, and it kind of says what we are as a town. And I like the fact that it's reaffirming these core beliefs, and I hope that, and I believe that most of the people in the town do abide by this type of statement. But the fact that we declare it and make it, reaffirm it, I think is important for our town in a lot of ways. I think it's a very positive statement, and a town should take it to heart as far as implementing things as it goes forward also. I was going to have a conversation with certain select board members just to get a feel for things before this came up, but the suggestion was that we would talk about it in an open meeting like this, and I thought that was a good idea, which is why I'm sharing this, and which is why it's here in front of us, to have this discussion, to talk about this declaration, to see which way we want to go as a town. Do we want to get behind this? Do we want to make it more forceful? Is it okay? Is it just going to be a declaration, and what's going to happen afterwards also? So I think the discussion happens afterwards as far as we are as a town, and I see a lot of positive things that can happen just by having a declaration like this. So I just open this up to discussion for other select board members' opinions and see where we go from there.
Well, I have to fully support this. I think it's very concise. It's not anything that needs to be thought of as negative in any way. I think it's well done, and I'm glad that we have this, and hopefully we all live by this anyway. But we have it on record now, perhaps. I hope.
Yeah. So I guess a couple of questions. You've given us a little bit of the history of the declaration that's been here before. We've had a talk around it, but not about it, which is fine. But a couple of points of clarification, if you don't mind. One is, can you just remind us of the genesis of this and the various iterations of it that have come before this? And then you mentioned about what happens after this, and I'm curious as to what you're looking at down the road as to how this would impact us as a community down the road.
The genesis of it, I believe, started in a town, I'm not sure if it was Franklin or where it was, in northwestern Vermont. And it was borrowed from a small town in Maine, I believe, where someone had visited and then came back to the select board, and it started there. And then there was a few gentlemen from the Rutland area that also helped with it too, and I think some of them are online that might be able to help me as far as explaining the genesis of this and how it's gotten to where it is and what it is at this point. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, Mr. Wakefield or Mr. Harnish, if you're out there and you would like to speak to the genesis and the history of this Declaration of Inclusion, we'd love to hear it if you're willing.
Very willing. This is Al Wakefield. I see Bob Harnish is on, but I don't know whether he is whether he's really on right now. Bob, are you there? Because Bob is the person who really got this started, and then I got involved, and then subsequently Norm Cohen, who is on. But it really got Bob. Are you on? Do you want to handle this?
Yes, I am.
Good.
No, go right ahead. I was offline from this. I'm not sure where we are.
Bob, one board member just asked for the background on how this got started. So you're the guy who got this started and got us involved. So if you just take it, for just a couple of minutes or so from there, providing the background, that might be helpful to the committee.
Sure. I'll get there. Yes, about 2 years ago, I was visiting with my cousin, who's chair of the select board in Franklin, and he said that his board had just adopted a Declaration of Inclusion. So I said, what is that? And so he got me a copy, and I thought it was fantastic. It's in the light of George Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor and a number of others. And I just felt that that this was something that would favor Vermont if we could get the general public to try to recognize their biases and to basically work together to make everybody feel welcome here. After all, Vermont does need to gently increase its population to keep the tax dollars flowing to support our state infrastructure and programming. So I presented it to my town of Pittsford, just north of Rutland, and our town met on it and then passed it at the next meeting. And then the town of Brandon, next town north from us, adopted it as well. So then at that point, I reached out to Al and to Norman Cohen, a retired lawyer, and we've been working on this statewide to try to get every town in Vermont to adopt a statement of inclusion. So that's where we are now.
Just to append what Bob has said, we now have 85 towns across the state that have in fact adopted. Most towns have adopted the original statement that is found on the Vermont Declaration of Inclusion website. Some towns have gone further, notably South Burlington, City of St. Albans, and a couple of others. The governor, about a year and a half ago when we started this, also issued 2 proclamations, one being a declaration of inclusion for the state, which is quite extensive, and the second being to designate the second week in May as Inclusion Week in Vermont, and several towns, notably Milton for sure, have set up programs, established programs, carried out programs on that during that week, and we've also issued a research paper during that week as well. That week should occur in May of this coming year. Our goal is to have 100 towns adopt, and as I said earlier, we've got 85, so 100 towns by May, and then onward to however we get to 246 to 247 towns eventually across Vermont. And that will achieve our vision of Vermont being the most inclusive state in the country, in the United States. So that's where we are. I'll shut up in just a second. Somebody asked what the follow-up is. If you go to our Vermont Declaration of Inclusion website, there are some gentle things which can be done, very simple, to begin to implement the declaration. As a start, just listing the declaration on your website, which many towns have done, making sure that as you bring businesses into town, that they are aware of the Declaration of Inclusion in everything and anything that you publish, laying out the Declaration of Inclusion. That can be done almost immediately at no cost. And then on from there. The state also has an IDEAL program just established. You might have heard Governor Scott lay out that just a couple of weeks ago. So it's at no cost, which will tell towns how to further implement the declaration and how to become more inclusive in their practices. Such the Vermont League of Cities and Towns has also a similar program. So those are all laid out, and those are on our website, at least links to those 2 programs, the IDEAL program and the EPIC program, which is the Vermont League of Cities and Towns program. So hopefully that gives you more background.
Well, thank you, Al and Bob, for that little background and information on the genesis of how this project started. Lee, does that answer the question? Or,
Well, it raised a whole bunch more questions, but I appreciate that. I guess the question that I have now, I glanced briefly at the ongoing implementation online, haven't had a chance to digest it, but it seems to me there are two things that I would like to explore a little bit more. One is the current version of the draft. We recognize that the town of Chester condemns all forms of discrimination and bigotry, and we strongly commit ourselves and our institutions to fair and equal treatment. Do you see the town of Chester not being inclusive, or do any of our policies lead to discrimination at this point, or are we already there?
well, I think that would be a good question to go through policies to see if we have that happening or not. I don't think anything obvious pops out in my mind that this is what's happening that we definitely could correct. I think it's something that a committee could get together and go through documents and policies and procedure to see if there is anything that might be against this statement that we're making here.
Well, I think our town manager has the control of all the policies. Is that correct?
Yeah,
and
we've
you've been through them all. Right. I mean, I guess the question is, I'm just wondering what problem we're trying to solve. I mean, I understand the whole idea of being inclusive and not being discriminatory against anyone. And the fact of the matter is that we don't discriminate as a town, because I don't think our policies, our procedures, our personnel are necessarily going to go out of their way to discriminate or not include people. I think it, like you said before, it's a hard issue. It's something that we all have to take and embrace individually. And I agree 100%. I mean, I think that we need to be very concerned with our actions, with our thoughts, with the things that drive us, our worldview, if you will, to make sure that we're not. I have to think how I act every day to make sure that I'm acting and treating other people with respect and the dignity that they deserve, regardless of whether they're similar to me or not. And so I guess the question is this something that I can't get behind? No, I don't think so. The first version I saw had something about some kind of a committee being formed, and I totally would be not for that. But this particular version, I think, makes sense from the standpoint of just alerting people to the fact that we as a town will strive to make our policies and our actions inclusive. The one concern I have with the ongoing aspect of it is I don't know where that's going. You know, looking at the website, there's some very vague language there that could lead to anything. And so I guess I would be a little bit concerned with that. But in addition, I'm not sure that this goes far enough. I think that we need to be inclusive of other. We strongly commit ourselves and our institute work in or pass through our community. I would think that we would add something to the effect of we also commit ourselves to be inclusive and protective of all people, from the elderly to those with disabilities, physical, mental, or otherwise, and the preborn. And I think that adding that language would make this more acceptable and more inclusive than what it says right now. You know, we strive to ensure that all of our plans, policies, programs, procedures, statements, et cetera, reflect these commitments. I think they do, and if they don't, then that's something that Julie should take on and be willing to address those particular parts of our town management.
Arnie?
Go ahead, Heather?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Heather.
Well, you know, I think it's hard for an individual to say that our policies are okay when maybe it's not inclusive of everybody. And so as a person of color, as a woman, as, you know, all all sorts of different people are going to perceive things differently. So having this as a commitment to understanding that our goal is to be inclusive, and it's okay to sit back and say, oh, everything we're doing is fine, but within the last couple years, the Human Rights Commission, as you recall, found us not in really good standing with some of the practices that we did. And I don't want to bring up and dredge up things, but this statement on our website for our employees, for the people who are coming through our town, is saying this is our commitment. And it could be, the language could not be, or is maybe not totally inclusive, or not, it's inclusive, but as specific as you like, but it's a general statement, in my view, that I believe in, and it's a good thing to strive to have our policies and procedures and our practices inclusive. And I think the board that worked on this, I want to thank them, they worked on this a lot, and they wanted to not get specific because inclusivity today may mean something that it doesn't mean later, or later on we may have other minority groups that we want to include and be inclusive of. So it's a dynamic thing. And I'm fully supportive of it, and the governor supportive of it. 86 towns are. So I want to say thank you to the team that worked on it, and I am supportive of this declaration of inclusion.
Thank you, Heather, and Lee, they can also echo what she has to say. Sometimes we have to say things out loud and not assume or wait for other issues to come up. So thank you for whomever did this. It's to the point, and it's well thought out, and it is who we are. Thank you.
Well, Heather, if I could just respond for a minute to your comment about issues that we've had in the past. I agree with you that in the past, not everyone has behaved in accordance with proper protocol, but the town has taken steps to remove those people from their positions. And so the policies and procedures that we have in place are working to prevent the types of actions that I think this is relating to. Although it's still not clear to me what the problem is that we're trying to solve. I understand that there's discrimination and there's exclusion, and there are a number of things that are of concern for us. And I go back to whether this is a group problem or this is an individual problem. And I would submit to you that this is an individual problem that I can't control, we can't control as a board, the citizens of Chester, to make them be more inclusive and less discriminatory. That's something that each person, each individual has to do on their own. Can we live our lives in a way that sets an example, or can we encourage other people to live that way? Absolutely, and that's what we should be doing. We should be living in a way where we are supporting our community. We're working hard for the good of our community and not just for ourselves. And so sometimes we have to do things that are difficult, things that we might not want to do, because that's what's best for our community, not what's best for us. And so from my standpoint, I see this as a laudable goal, a laudable objective. And I'm not necessarily objecting to it from a standpoint of, do I think it is going to do anything in Chester or not do anything in Chester if we adopt this or not? No, I don't. But again, I just want to be really careful that we are considering all aspects of anything that we adopt and how it's going to impact and influence us immediately and those who follow in our footsteps down the road. And looking at the, excuse me just a second, looking at the website that was mentioned earlier, the goals are very, very wishy-washy. And you said yourselves, there are some marginalized people that we don't even know about yet. And so I think that concerns me that this could be used down the road to discriminate more against certain people who don't fall into line with the accepted practice or the accepted beliefs.
Well, and I understand that we handled the situation that was in front of us, but this is like saying, okay, as a community, this is one of our values and this is what we believe in. It's like a mission statement or a part of a mission statement for a company. And because we dealt with a difficult situation a few years ago does not mean that we aren't going to have a difficult situation in 3 days or 3 months or 3 years. So this is just something to set the tone of what we believe in. And in all due respect, as a white woman walking through this world as a white woman, I can't say that I understand how it is, Lee, to be a white man. But our history is one where the predominant amount of power has been in white males' hands. And so the structures that are set up don't view the world through that prism. And I think this is saying, and I don't want to suggest that I know how it is to walk through the world as another individual, but this is saying that I'm going to be inclusive of other individuals who walk through their lives with different discriminations, different impressions, and in acknowledging that there can be differences is a step towards healing our nation. So, and we need healing in Chester too. So I just think that a very general, positive, affirmative statement that we're inclusive of individuals who march to a different drummer than we do, we're going to be inclusive and accepting of that. So I'm strongly supportive of this.
I am too as well.
When I look at a declaration like this, it's a reminder to keep these ideas on the table. It's not a directive. It's not going to tell us what to do. It's going to be up to us to decide what we're going to do with a statement like this. It's not going to show up on a website, and it's not going to go down a list and say, hey, we have to do this, we have to do that. We as a town have to decide how we're going to approach this and how we're going to deal with this issue. And it is an issue. The fact that we say we don't have a problem, well, I think that's up for debate in a lot of ways also. Each town would adapt this and travel its own course with it and do what they want with it. Maybe they're going to file it and put it away and nothing's ever going to happen with it. I hope that's not the case in Chester. But it's going to be up to us as a town to decide, where do we go from here? Are we just going to make a declaration and we forget about it and put it on the shelf along with other declarations and things that we have in the past, or are we going to take this to heart and really use it and apply it as much as we can? And maybe there are some issues, maybe there aren't. But the fact that we're reaffirming these beliefs that we have that are my core beliefs, I think that's a positive thing. And I can't see the negative in it. And what you insinuated a little back before, Lee, that this could be used in the future for discrimination was, I don't even know how you got to that point like that.
That's exactly what I was just going to ask you, because you just said a few minutes ago that, you know, we would adopt this, and then we either file it away or we do something. So what does it look like to do something?
Well, I think we'd get a group of people together to make those decisions and to decide and have a discussion about this. I don't think we're going to decide that tonight.
I guess
think
I'm
this
not
is just
following.
opening- What's that?
I'm sorry. I guess I'm not following what the it would be.
I don't
Are
know
we
what
gonna?
it would be, as far as how we go forward. It would be a choice of us. I mean, the people that were involved in this, and I later on will read the names of the people on the committee, spent a lot of work and a lot of time with discussions and talking. Maybe that would be the core group that would have these discussions further along, and to see which direction we go. What do we do from here? How do we handle it from here? And what happens?
And that's what concerns me, and that's why I'm thinking that,
It concerns you that a group of people are going to be talking about an issue and making decisions or recommendations?
yeah, because I read the previous
That's
iteration.
democracy.
Yes, if everybody has a voice at that. And I understand that that's what this is all about, is everybody having a voice in this. But we all know that not everybody has the ability to spend the time or make the effort. And I guess that's where I'm coming down is what would any group do to implement this Declaration of Inclusion in the town of Chester? Would it be that group looking at all the policies and procedures and then making recommendations as to how we can do things better? And then, you know, who's the final arbiter of that? And again, I'm sorry to keep dragging this out, but I think that the question that I have is, where is this going to end up? Because even if we adopt it right now, you said it could either get filed away and we never do anything with it, or we do something with it. And I guess that's what I'm asking, is what we would do with it. What would be the impact of it? Because I can see, if you look at where we've come in the past 50 years, some of the things that we're talking about that are going on in our society were things that weren't even imaginable 50 years ago, or 40 years ago, or even 10 years ago. And yet those are the things that are consuming our society and causing us to be fractured, because we're not acting on behalf of other people, we're acting on behalf of ourselves. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is, I'd like to understand the problem that is being solved by this for the town of Chester. Now, I understand that each one of us needs to read this Declaration of Inclusion and apply it to our own lives. I certainly do. But I'm just wondering how this would impact the highway crew, or the guys that mow the cemetery, or how the police department. I know that we've had issues in the past, and I'm not turning a blind eye to the things that we've seen in the past, but I'm just concerned that we're going to get down a road that is going to be very difficult to turn around, and we're going to be expecting certain attitudes, actions from people, and if they don't measure up to our expectations, then we're going to take action.
Lee, what are you, it sounds like you're fearful of something.
Well, Heather,
Are you fearful
honestly,
of something with this statement, Declaration of Inclusion?
no, and I've said a couple of times that I think the Declaration of Inclusion is fine in its current form. But what I'm saying is that if we look at where we've come from as a society over the past 50 years, I don't think we're in a better place right now. And a lot of that is because that we have removed, to a large extent, personal responsibility. We've become more dependent on our government. We've become less considerate of those around us. And so as a result of that, we have gotten to a point where we don't even know our neighbors, let alone know how to love them as we ought to treat them as we ought to. And so from my perspective, as I see the crumbling of our society, I see this not necessarily as a step in that direction, but I just wanted to make sure that we are understanding what it is that we're doing and why we're doing this. And if it's just to say, yeah, we should all be inclusive and we shouldn't discriminate on something, yeah, that's great. But I keep hearing things, well, down the road or ongoing from this, you know, this could lead to something else and nobody can define that for me. And I've asked this question of a number of different people that have come before the board. What's your plan for X, Y, or Z? And sometimes I get blank stares and sometimes I get, oh, well, it's a good question. Here's our plan for whatever it is. I'm not hearing a plan here.
Well, I think the plan could be that we put it on our website and we reflect upon it when we're making policy. We reflect upon it when we have hiring practices. We reflect upon it when we want to include people of diverse backgrounds for boards. Like, let's not appoint just X, Y, and Z kind of person for boards. So it's inclusive. It's stating to the citizens that we want to be an inclusive community, and that I would think would help the fabric of our community have value about inclusiveness and treating people, other human beings well. So to me, it's a very positive statement.
Here, here, I agree with you 100%.
Go ahead, Ben.
For my few cents here, so Arnie, when you approached me with a document the other day of my opinion on it, and I said that I was in favor, I thought the wording, the verbiage of it was fine. And as I read this, it's different than what was previously given to us. And we had a conversation about general. And I think it's important to the concept of, so one of the differences, and I opened the wrong one.
There's one line that was different, and I sent out an email about 3 days ago.
There is, and I got it, and
Okay. All right.
full transparency, like, got it, we're good. But what I would say is something to me is we strongly commit ourselves and our institutions to the fair and equal treatment of everyone. And I personally feel that that's where that sentence can end. I don't feel that there's a need to including members of other groups. Because if we're saying everyone, it should mean everyone. Additionally, as far as the board goes, in my first year on the board, document came up, we were the selectmen of Chester. And so by doing the right thing, which I think is the basis of everything we do, and when I talk to my kids about, all right, are you doing the right thing? Well, nope, all right, let's do the right thing. We changed it to select board instead of select men. And as we work on creating committees, in my, although not continuous, but 7 years being a part of the board, we have made a giant effort to make those boards as diverse as possible to try and get the feelings of everyone. And so we take all those people that say, hey, I'd really like to be part of this board. And as the select board, how can we make this as diverse as possible to make everyone's voice heard? So my opinion is this. I personally would not be in favor of the last part of that sentence in paragraph 1. And additionally, I don't believe we need another committee. And to Lee's point, it does sound when we talk about this of, well, we're either going to file it away and forget about it, or we're going to do something and have a committee that comes up and investigates and looks through policy and procedure and through guidelines and manages, is I guess how I would see that. And my opinion is you have a select board, we have a town manager. As these things do come up, which they may, to your point, we can then address those as they come up. So as far as, if we were coming today of the concept of, hey, would we be in favor of the statement of inclusion? And for me personally, if it didn't have that last part of the sentence in it,
Which part exactly are you talking about?
so I would end it at everyone.
Leave
So-
out the part about traditionally marginalized.
Marginalized groups, people who live, work, and pass through our community, like, we are strongly committed ourselves and our institutions to the fair and equal treatment of everyone. Done. I don't see a need to split up groups, because then you're grouping. It's everyone. And with that.
I like that.
With that, my take back is your conversation about committee and another group to provide oversight and their opinion. You have a board, you have a town manager. As these things come up, address them. And if we want to say to town manager, hey, let's start knocking out a policy or a procedure 1 or 2 a month, we will get through those things. If it came down to, you know what, let's take the statement of inclusion and we want to accept that we are committing ourselves to doing the right thing, that's something I would be open to. My reservation is, it sounds like there's further backstory of things that are wanted to happen. And the way things go about in that sense, I have a concern about.
It seems like you have the same fears that Lee has.
I don't
future.
have a fear. I have no fear, and I think that's an
No,
unfair comment.
It appears to
and-
me that you have a fear. Maybe you have one, maybe you don't. But Lee's statement was also to the same fact that he wasn't sure what's going to be happening in the future, so therefore we shouldn't go that route.
I feel that you have a need for,
I don't
I
have a
feel that
need
there's
for
a,
anything.
so
What I'm
my
trying-
interpretation, right, just as you have yours of me having a fear, which I don't, is like, again, personally, if saying, hey, Chester, we're going to do the right thing, I'm all about it. I want to know what the concept and processes of the future are to determine if I'm okay with what your direction is.
Well,
And if there's no issue, then do you have to have a committee that's designated to supervise and manage that?
not exactly sure what you're saying as far as the committee goes and worrying about the fact that they might have some opinions or some discussions that aren't exactly what we thought they were going to be. I think sometimes when we have groups of people get together and they have conversations about items that are important to us or that are meaningful to us, it's good to hear what they have to say. There's nothing requiring implementation. It's basically conversations. And each town will adapt and travel its own path on something like this. Even forming a committee might be hard to do, depending on who would be joining it and who would be involved with it and stuff. I would hope that there would be enough people in town that would be interested and supportive of the ideas that are presented in here to see where we fit into this whole scheme of things and ideas as far as inclusion goes. I hear you when you say, I wish we could just save the fair treatment of everyone, and that'd be it. But history has told us that's not it. There's marginalized people. There's people that have been treated wrongly throughout history. As to Heather's point, it is a white male society that has brought us to where we are. And whether we agree with that or not, I firmly believe that. And I think part of it is the fact that marginalized groups haven't been included in the conversations throughout history and throughout a lot of our lives and what's going on. I've come from a life that I used to live back when I was a police officer back in the 70s and 80s. And there was a time there that I was involved in a lot of situations that I'm not proud of. And it formed my opinions and my ideas on a lot of things that happen in this world. And I see what things go on, and I see even what happens in a small town like this. And to disregard things that are happening and turning a blind eye to it, I think is wrong. I think when we make an affirmation, a statement like this, I think we should make sure we back it up in one way or another. And I'm not saying we have to force anything on anybody, but I think the discussion should be continual, and maybe it doesn't come up all the time, but it should be in the back of our minds, and it should be part of something that we are always thinking about and how it applies to the world that we live in and the town that we live in. We all want the same things in life. We want a fair and just society. We want happiness. We want family. We want a lot of things. And I think this is one object, one item that would help us in that direction, because it's obviously, it's a hard discussion even at our level. And it is
Barney?
sometimes. So I think that if we have more people involved with this discussion and get it out in the open, and it doesn't end at everyone. It ends at all these other groups also. It ends at everybody. And I agree, it is everybody. But sometimes there's groups that I think I have to recognize that have been screwed through life a lot more than other people have. And it's not to saying that life is not hard for everybody. It's just harder for some people in certain groups to get to the same place that we are. And that's why I feel the way I do about this.
And it's for the same reason that I have my own feeling that it is everyone, for the fact of moving forward in a peaceful way that everyone works together and lives together and is treated fairly. I'm 100%, like, I don't, everyone. So.
Arnie?
Yeah.
Is our goal to, do you want a motion? Do you want to vote on this? What are our options here? Because I'm more than happy to make a motion if you want me to, that Chester accepts this declaration of inclusion, or what are our options other than an up and down vote right now, or what else can we do?
Heather, usually the motions that I request and ask for are the mundane ones about approving minutes and stuff. As far as motions like this, it's up to each individual board member to decide
okay,
if they want to make a motion or not. And I'll be
okay, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the Chester, Vermont Declaration of Inclusion as we have in our packet.
I'll second that motion. Lee Dakin.
So Heather is the motion to accept the Declaration of Inclusion as it is written and read, and Lee Dakin is the second now. Further conversation, further discussion regarding this.
I'd like to offer an amendment to add additional language.
I don't think we should do that because the committee has worked on this. They've asked select board members for their feedback
Heather,
for
I
the
think
last
it's my
6
right
months.
to be able to offer or ask for an amendment here, and whether you agree with my amendment or not, I guess I have the right to put it out there. So if you don't agree with it, then you don't need to vote for it, but I'm going to offer it anyway.
Lee, what is the amendment?
The amendment would change the language to read, recognizing that diversity strengthens and enriches a community, the town of Chester condemns all forms of discrimination and bigotry. We strongly commit ourselves and our institutions to the fair and equal treatment of everyone, including members of traditionally marginalized groups who lives or works in or passes through our community. We also commit ourselves to be inclusive and protective of all people, from the elderly to those with disabilities, physical, mental, or otherwise, and the preborn. We strive to ensure that all of our plans, policies, programs, procedures, statements, and actions reflect these commitments and support a community in which all persons feel welcome and safe to express their opinions and engage in the community.
So I'm not exactly sure how this works with an amendment and how it's accepted or not accepted, or how do we vote on it or not vote on it?
You need a second to the amendment, and then you will vote on the
On the
amendment.
amendment. So Lee has made an amendment to the motion. Is there a second on it? Hearing none, the amendment does not pass. So we're back to the
You're
original.
back to the original motion.
Any further discussion on the original declaration?
So I think we need to be clear so that the Declaration of Inclusion that was included in our packet, that we were not using that one. Is that correct?
Could you read it again, Arnie?
Was also not in the packet, but it was, I
The motion was for what was in the packet, so.
No, the motion was for what I read.
No, she
No,
said
she said the
packet.
packet.
All right, Arnie, could you read not the one that was in the packet, but the one that was sent to us with the change?
Second one, the email one. That's the
Yeah.
one that I read in the beginning. I will read it again for you.
Thank you.
Recognizing that diversity strengthens and enriches a community, the town of Chester condemns all forms of discrimination and bigotry. We strongly commit ourselves and our institutions to the fair and equal treatment of everyone, including members of traditionally marginalized groups who live or work in or pass through our community. We strive to ensure that all of our plans, policies, programs, procedures, statements, and actions reflect these commitments and support a community in which all persons feel welcome and safe to express their opinions and engage in the community.
Yes, that is the one that I'm at, that I made the motion to accept.
And I seconded it.
Okay. Any further discussion on this declaration of inclusion?
Julie, have you had time to discuss this with the town attorney?
No, I didn't know that I needed to.
To do what?
He asked if I had put this to the town attorney. I haven't given it to Jim.
I wouldn't think there's anything in there that's legally has an issue with it.
I think it's more of a statement.
It's a
not.
declaration.
It's not a binding. I think it's more of a statement.
Right, I agree with that.
So I will make a motion to amend the document, and I will just read the first paragraph and then move forward with the second paragraph. But recognizing that diversity strengthens and enriches the community, the town of Chester condemns all forms of discrimination and bigotry. We strongly commit ourselves and our institutions to the fair and equal treatment of everyone.
So Ben has made a motion to amend the first paragraph of the
Second.
Declaration of Inclusion. Is there a second on that?
I'll second that.
All those in favor of the amendment as Ben stated, please say aye.
Aye.
I think we're going to have a roll call on this. So the ayes, Mr. Gustafson, yes?
Aye, yep.
Ben?
Yes.
Heather?
No,
Lee Dakin?
No,
And myself, no. The amendment fails. So we're back to the original Declaration of Inclusion. Any further discussion on it? All those in favor of the Declaration of Inclusion that I read just now, please say aye.
aye,
We'll take a roll call on it since we're on Zoom. Heather?
aye,
Lee? Dakin?
aye.
Lee Gustafson?
Nay.
Ben Whalen?
Nay.
And myself, yes. Motion passes 3-2. That was a difficult conversation, and it's amazing that we don't really want to take it further. I would think that when we disagree this much and have issues on a document, a simple statement like this, that we would welcome a conversation to continue further. And I would hope it would include the faith leaders in this town, the schools, the library, and everybody else that's involved also, to become part of this conversation, not just us as the select board. Because it's obvious to me that I think it's a topic that should be discussed. It's evoking a lot of emotion and a lot of feelings, and I think it's important that we air these objections, these considerations, these ideas, these feelings that we have to get to where we could be more together as far as this goes.
I think it was a good discussion, and I appreciate everybody being willing to listen.
Is it worth us, I know there's a lot of comments that got on the chat. Is that something we typically look at or no?
No.
The chat, I try to even turn it off because
Yeah.
it's having like a separate meeting off to the side.
It is.
and
It
we
really
can't
should
even
be,
follow it.
it should not be functional during the meeting.
It's extremely difficult just to follow a meeting in general, never mind try to find all these side conversations that are going
No,
on.
going forward, I will disable
Just-
chat function. Yep.
I mean, if people would like to comment, there's a hand up now at the
No, they
Chester
can
Telegraph.
talk.
I'm more than welcome to have people comment. Is that Sean or Cynthia?
Hi, Arnie, it's Sean. That being said, if the chat is turned off, that's one thing. If it is turned on, it's part now of a public record and should not be destroyed.
Well, it won't be destroyed, but I'm not going to be, I don't think anybody on the board's going to be reading until after the meeting.
Sure.
But yeah, okay. And we'll make sure next time that it is off.
Yeah.
We
we'll disable.
weren't even aware that, but thank you for that information. Appreciate it. Bill?
Bill Lindsay, this has been a real lively discussion, and I've listened to both sides of the coin. We're asking, or the board is asking through this statement, for all to agree. I don't think that is, I've heard the word democracy, but I've not really seen it happen, because I believe this should be an article for town meeting where there would be a better representation and discussion of how people feel. One of the things that was in my mind as this was going on, and I go back to the years that I've served in the town here, is what happens to the word precedence. I don't have to tell you about Act 250. People read about it in the paper. They have pluses and they have minuses. Some things have been good for Vermont. Some things have not been so good for Vermont. I look at this problem. I wish I was an attorney and had a large attorney office, because I can see with the elements of the wording that's been presented that it's going to infringe upon many people's right and bring cases that will do no good for communities, but will be at the expense of someone. And that someone, when the town signs on to something of this nature, could be used against the town as a supporting document, as Act 250 has become in other legislative directives. So I think this was the best discussion I've ever heard from the select board. I think you all did very well. It's obvious there's many different opinions, and I think the board really needs to take advantage of this through a town meeting plan article. It should be an article of adoption. If it fails, you now know what your community wants. If it passes, you know what your community wants. That would be representative democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Before we move on to the next item on our agenda, the group, I didn't mention the names of the people that did work on this, and I'd just like to put these names out there that were the people that were involved in the conversations that brought us to this point. And it was Tuck Wunderly, Janessa Perney, Sheldon Gethler, Beth Brothers, Kathy Pellet, David Lord, Nick Boki, and Bill Dakin. And I would like to thank those community members for being a part of this, involved in this from the beginning. Next item on our agenda is our Whiting Library budget discussions. So we have Pamela Johnson Spurlock, the new director of the library, here with us, and Donna Hudkins, the chairman of the board over at the library. And I think in your packages, we have a funding request and some information from the group. And you would like to speak to the board regarding?
Well, first I wanted to introduce Pamela.
Hi.
Who has just been here a week and has put in probably more hours, even with 2 snow days. And she hit the ground running, which is great. I'm just going to basically read this and you can interject. At the November Select Board meeting, we submitted the budget, and the anticipated Whiting Library budget for 2023 is it was increased by 10.54% to $142,922. The library plans on increasing its fundraising goal, its income from grants and book sale goal, no pressure to Pamela for the grants, while decreasing other costs where it can. The library is requesting funding in the town budget in the amount of $100,000, which is an additional $7,000 for 2023 over 2022. And it's 70% of the Whiting Library budget. And this has been the percentage paid by the town toward the library budget for the past couple of years. Now, our budget request is based on some immediate needs, hiring the new director and updating technology used in the library. And there will be additional expenses for the cost of upgrading our computer systems and our technology. At the November meeting, we were asked what the plan was for the future of the library. Now, the previous Board of Trustees, along with the previous director and the children's librarian, had done extensive work to put together a strategic plan for the next 5 years. That strategic plan had never been approved by the previous board, thus it was not presented to the select board. So the current Board of Trustees has reviewed the strategic plan, and now that we have a new director, have her input, and we really want to fine-tune it a little bit and clarify in more detail some of the goals and objectives before it is approved and submitted to the town. At the highest level, our goal is to bring the Whiting Library into the 21st century and make it an integral part of the town of Chester. Several goals in the plan that the director and the board would like to work on, and we hope to have this plan submitted before the end of 2023 to the select board. Our plan is to develop programming for all segments in our community, engaging and maintaining young readers as well as adults and seniors, and providing a comfortable space at the library to welcome members of the public where they can gather, learn, socialize, and foster connections. And we want to address significant issues, updating and replacing outdated computers, tablets, and software. Now, the select board had asked what funds that were listed in our assets before. The 300,000 plus or minus listed, questioned, is a sum total of all of the library assets. Initially, we thought that was a whole separate fund. And this, after much discussion with many people, we found that this was the sum total of all of our assets. This includes wealth management funds, money market accounts, petty cash account, and another fund, which is where any net income after expenses at the end of the year is deposited or deducted. Now, currently, as of the end of November, the net income, or actually it's as of December 15th because I stopped by and got the information from Sil yesterday, is we're at a minus $13,771.77. Now, the select board had asked why in the past, if there were funds left over, did we need more money from the town? Which is a very valid point. And after much discussion, we can't really look back at what has been done in the past because we don't know why there was money left over. We don't, we looked at different notes, we've looked at backgrounds, I've gone through records that are in the trustee room and never really saw why, if a budget was set and what the spending was and the income was, and there was money left over, and that money went back into this fund. We can only really look at what we plan to do now and in the future. Past overages shouldn't be used or counted as operating funds, as they are a finite, non-renewable resource. What we're asking the town for is an operating budget. Going forward, we can look at how much overage or underfunding there is on the budget based on normal fundraising year with customers coming to the library, because neither fundraising nor patronage has been normal for the past 3 years. There may have been money left in previous years because improvements had been put off. We don't know. The funding we ask for is based on what the library needs now. Perhaps in the future, we may not need as much funding from the town. But at this time, we do. And so we respectfully ask for that additional $7,000. Excuse me. The printout that I got from Sil on the balance sheet currently, the fund that we get money from or put money in right now is about $146,000.
Which fund was that, Donna?
It's just called.
The fund?
It's just called a fund.
And that's the 146 that usually the surplus would be put into?
Yeah,
from
it's
every
like
year?
that's what goes in or comes out as we need it. Now, I asked a lot of people where this money originally came from. And I think Julie forwarded you what Sil had sent me, all the history of deposits, and we even talked to Kathy Pellet, and she seems to think that it started with a bequest that somebody left, money that left to the library, and then there was some property sold. Now, I just found this out this afternoon, so I really haven't had a chance to go look into it. But that's where that money started. It is not, that's the word I'm looking for. It is not an endowment.
No, it's not an endowment.
No, no.
So most of it was probably from surpluses every year, and then that parcel that they sold to the neighbor at the time, and that's where that money ended up.
Right, right. So, right now, that money, like, as I said, right now, we're $13,000 over what we had.
So that fund was decreased by the 13,000.
Yeah, and it does not reflect that yet.
No.
Correct.
But that's,
It will.
That could
So
be,
you need
yeah.
to lease from that 146, you need to lease.
yeah. So that 13,000 is your deficit, I would think, for this.
And it's about
For current year.
13.4.
Kind of? Is
For
that
current year. It's a current year deficit.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and there are still expenses that have not gone through yet.
Exactly. And another thing you should consider, while you haven't had to pay a director for 6 months, due to the previous board's resignations and the new board coming in and not having a director, the library has not been able to fundraise the amount that they usually would do. And therefore, we're in the, we have a deficit, we're negative. So that's a sad occurrence. But even with looking forward, there are a lot of areas to bring the library up to the 21st century. And we're about to be in 2023. And we're dealing with technology and practices that remind me of the 90s. And I'm being honest. Last week was a bit of a shock. It's charming, but there are so much room for improvement to better serve this community and the people within this community. We need to update our technology desperately. That has been a bit of a frustrating part for me, having worked in a school system with a wonderful technology department and wonderful technology at our fingertips. and feeling like I'm going back in time. Our system, our library management system, is very basic. It needs consideration, but there's so many areas of improvement, but there's a lot of deferred maintenance that needs to also be taken care of. So part of that extra money also needs to handle the situations that haven't happened in the past. The library is the jewel of the community, and we need to honor it as such.
So, for me personally, I'm totally in favor of supporting the library. And I just have a question, hopefully between you two and maybe Julie, I can get an answer here. So when I look at the budget versus actuals, I show that we have 30,000 surplus based on those line items, correct? And so my interpretation would then be that the negative 13,000 is probably most likely from the wealth management and due to stock market. Am I correct in my? There's a line item, which is why it's not that much.
So your expenses are down? Your current year, your expenses are down, but your revenue is down as well?
Okay. No, I see it now.
This is like all years, and this actually shows.
We have that as well.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. I'm good.
You good?
I'm good.
The items that you talked about as far as maintenance items, I thought the town usually maintains like.
We're not talking building, we're not necessarily building.
Oh, okay.
That is in the works, but we're talking about maintaining the collection, our technology resources.
Okay.
There's a lot that goes into the library
Okay.
besides just the physical collection.
Yep.
And there's a lot that needs updating. Again, I'm only 4 days in the job.
So you don't have all the answers?
So I don't have all the answers, but I can definitely see room for improvement. And to really serve the community that it, in the way it deserves.
And again, that's why with the strategic plan, we really wanted Pamela's input, not just going on what the previous board and director had asked for. We also, I guess they did a survey and they sent out, and they did this plan based on the responses that they got. It was a very small margin of people who gave input.
That was actually a grant through the American Library Association that the library did get. And everything was sent out to I believe it was every Chester and Andover resident. But the responses sadly were not as many as hoped.
I think they also had public meetings.
We did.
Where they
We did.
gathered input. So I don't think it was based just on survey results. I do think there was other public
a
input.
whole plan and grant that went forward to gather this information with surveys and public input. Yeah. Again,
I
before my time.
remember at our last meeting and stuff, the questions were about those funds, that 300,000 K that are listed on here, and what can they be used for or not used for? And I think it was Lee that you brought it up as far as
I don't
what
think
items.
there's any restrictions written, other than we thought the $300,000 was like its own separate account, but it's not. It's everything. So of course, some funds, they're in investments,
They're not touchable.
We can't take them.
We can't touch them.
But these aren't that.
Well, you can.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, just other money.
And another thing I would like to just interject in, I was talking to the previous library director today, and there is not a disaster plan in place for this library, and that is another thing that we need to consider, that most libraries do have in place. And so if something were to happen with Mother Nature, we need to have a plan in place of how to rebuild the library should a disaster happen. And that is not in place, and most libraries do have that. Or from my experience, that was something.
Something like a managed capital asset
Well, the building
management plan.
itself is
Sure,
part of the
it's
town
fine.
stuff, but if you're talking about, they're
Also,
talking
you have
about
to
the
think of the
library.
collection and.
They're talking about their part
The
of the library.
books and the
Right, right,
information and the
right.
technology, whatever else is in there.
Yeah.
So can I ask you a question? What obligations does the library have other than what you have listed on the budget for funds? Is there anything that is not listed on your budget that you would be required to pay for that's not part of that?
The only thing, I mean, we were pretty thorough when we went through what we thought we needed. If anything, we might have shorted the technology. In other words, we have to pay a monthly subscription for things that we don't have yet. So we don't know what those costs were going to be. So we anticipated, monthly cell phone costs. Monthly, we pay a monthly fee for hosting the website. In talking to Laura, our treasurer, today, we were going back and forth, and she said, we might not have budgeted enough there. But really, that's
a concern. I think overall it's, we've got a plan. Again, just 4 days in, we're starting. We're all fairly new. And we do want to make sure that this is mindful of our constituents, of the community, and to, spend wisely, but also be proactive and not defer things that should not be deferred.
So of the budget that you presented to us,
That's how it stands up now. We would like to grow in our offerings to the public, but we've got to get stable first before
well, I
we do
guess
that.
my question was related to, of the things that you just mentioned that you don't necessarily have a number for, what's the rough amount that is unbudgeted, or you don't really know, or you?
Haven't gotten to that point yet.
So you estimating like
having
5,000 or 50,000, or you have no idea?
Well, I mean, one number that was thrown out, talking with a board member today, when we were thinking about updating our technology, was a budget of $25,000.
How many?
25,000.
25,000, okay.
And that's just one area.
Right,
I
right.
mean,
Now, I guess my question is, you're asking us for $100,000, and in the past, we've been providing 75 until last year, I think, and then it was 93. And I just am thinking about the constituent that comes up to me and says, the library has 300,000 in assets. Why are they asking the town for $100,000? And from what I understand, it's not like you can just pull money out forever out of that, but I don't necessarily see a reason why you can't use some of that money, because you don't necessarily have, other than your disaster, I would think that if I don't know if we have insurance on the collection or any of that stuff,
There is
but
insurance on the collection. I think more is, we need to pay our staff a living salary, and that has also been neglected historically by the town.
okay.
We need to commend our children's librarian for all the work. She has kept that library afloat for 6 months, and especially the last 2 months since we lost Will. I don't think people have acknowledged that enough for her, and she is not getting paid enough for her professional level.
So is that reflected in the budget?
We haven't even gotten to that point yet.
I mean, we gave her, an increase, basic increase for next year. We haven't-
Okay.
I mean, salaries are not under the town control, though. I
Right,
mean,
right.
we
No.
we have a big
No,
influence
right.
because of the money that we give to you.
But we need that money to pay.
Yeah.
Well,
But the town
and
hasn't
again,
shorted them, I just want that clear.
Oh, I know.
Thank you.
getting back to my point, if my brother came up to me and said, hey, can you give me $50,000 when he has $300,000 sitting in his bank account?
So we
I
don't
would a
have
hard
300
time-
sitting in a bank
Excuse me just a
account.
minute. I would have a really hard time looking him in the face and saying, oh yeah, sure, help yourself, because I know that there has to be some level of give and take, and not that I don't appreciate the library, I really do. I think it's a great asset to the town, and I applaud everything that's going on, but I'm also very considerate of the taxpayer and the fact that our taxes are going to have to go up this year because of diesel prices, et cetera. And when I tell my constituents, oh, your taxes are going to go up by a certain number of pennies per 100,000, and part of that's the library fund when the library's sitting on 300,000, I would have a hard time with that. So I don't mean to be a jerk, and I apologize ahead of time, but it's just that's the concern that I have when people come up to me and say, why are my taxes going up, and what's this about the library? I have to be able to give them a good answer.
Well, I feel like the library is a drop in the bucket compared to everything that the town's having to pay, but we have to look at the fact that we can't look at what wasn't spent previously. And again, it's not 300, that's including accounts that we cannot touch. We do have a little bit of a surplus, and we're going to have to dip into that this year to help cover for the costs that we don't have. But we also have to look at what has not been taken care of, in the past years, and repair that damage.
So I'm sorry.
Again, 7,000 is for the operating expenses yearly. That fund is finite.
Right, I totally get that, and I'm not arguing with that. And maybe I misheard something, but I thought that all of those funds were accessible.
No.
But now, so which ones are not? Do you have a breakdown?
The wealth management, for one. The only thing that is accessible right now, I'm sorry, I need to get bifocals, is line, the fourth line down, due to / from other funds. That is accessible, but again, we will be having to pull money from that fund to help cover the expenses this year, and we don't even have that complete total yet. And then we need to look at, right, $146,137.28. And that's not including, again, we need to desperately update our technology.
Sure, and again, I'm not arguing with you as far as what needs to be done. You guys, that's your bailiwick, not mine. I don't.
Right.
My position right now is money. And so I guess I'd like an answer to how much of that 300,000 is available to you, not.
$146,137.28.
That's what's available to us.
And that's not including our current deficit.
Arnie?
Yes.
This is Heather. I just think that the library has had, there's been a lot going, and it's been a big year, and $7,000 increase, I figure, is 7.5%. And so they're asking for that increase, and I'm at this point comfortable with that. I think in a year, if it's still in this much chaos, it may, have some problems, but I think the new board needs to get some time to straighten out some of these things, and I'm okay with the $7,000 increase.
Thank you, Heather. We're probably not going to be making a decision on the exact amount or money tonight, but we're gathering the information, so when we come to the budget time, we will be able to make an informed decision. So appreciate that feedback. We do have one hand up online. Mr. Need, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Arnie. First, I want to say I fully support the library's request for funding, and I think it's reasonable. As Heather said, I think the library has been through a really difficult time. It is an absolutely critical asset to our community, so I support the request. But I do want to comment on statements that have been made, just to clarify. the library has maintained what has been called the Sustainability Fund, and that fund is managed by M&T Bank. And built into that fund is the ability to withdraw funds. And in fact, the previous board voted on what range of funding withdrawals that could be taken annually. And if my memory serves me, it was somewhere around 4.5% to 5%. And that was built in just for contingencies, raise in expenses or unexpected losses of revenue. So it should be very clear what the Sustainability Fund is for. It was clearly defined in the past. And any open questions could certainly be answered by M&T Bank, the fund managers, as well as the previous treasurer. And the other thing, two more things I'd like to comment on. The issue of technology upgrades, which I think I absolutely agree are very, very critical. But I do want to correct the misconception that those technology upgrades were deferred. They certainly weren't deferred by the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees deferred to the director to do asset assessments and to report any needed upgrades to technology. And the board never refused a technology upgrade. So any deficiencies in the technology were not deferred deliberately. They were unknown to the Board of Trustees, just for the record. And the final correction I'd like to make is on the strategic plan, because I've seen 2 or 3 times now this statement, the parenthetical statement that the strategic plan was never approved by the previous Board of Trustees. As Julie mentioned, there was a series of meetings, there was surveys, there was lengthy months-long discussion about the strategic plan. The data input was completed. The Board of Trustees agreed to and voted for the content of the strategic plan. The director was tasked with final formatting, graphics, and cleanup of that plan, and it was never presented to the trustees because she resigned. So just to be clear about the chronology of what went on. But again, to circle back and say I fully support the request for the budget increase because I think it's warranted and it is a terrific resource that we need to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, for that information and the clarification. Oh.
Thank you, Robert. Bill?
You're very welcome. Thank you.
So I think that certainly in terms, Lee, of your question, how much can we afford to take out of our fund, if you will, to pay towards our annual cost of budget? One of the responses is we're already going to be taking, we've got a $17,000 deficit at the moment, so that money's got to come out of that. Do we don't?
13.4 per as standing right now.
All right, $13,000. So that money's going to be coming out of our deficit, or whatever our source of income is. So it's not as if we want to be fully funded for, or that we're ignoring that source of funds. Another point is, and Robert said that yes, there is an annual withdrawal that's available to us from our wealth management fund. That wealth management fund has suffered a significant loss along with all the stock investments over the last 12 months, whatever that period is. So we're down how many? About $30,000+. And so if we had an increasing amount of value in our stock plan, we certainly would be in a position to take out that 4+% amount. But like everybody else's who's been involved in investments, our fund has gone down significantly. So we don't have that money available right now. So while we'd like to take 4.5%, I don't know if M&T Bank would support that withdrawal because of the status of the drop in the value of our investment fund. So the $13,000 is coming out of our surplus.
almost
And
14.
our fund, our management fund is not nearly as robust as it now as it was a year ago.
Thank you for that information, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
All this information and all these numbers will help us in our decision as we go forward. And I agree with some of the statements that were made that the library is an important part of our community. It's a gem for the community to have a resource like that that is well-staffed, well embraced by the community, well used. And in a town this small, I think it's an important part of our community in general for a lot of reasons, economic reasons, attracting people to town, attracting businesses. And hopefully when we look at the numbers and we look at our budget, we'll be able to do what's equitable and right.
And a wonderful library is also attractive to families coming into a community.
Yes, it is. Any other questions or concerns from board members regarding the library budget and the information in front of us?
I just had one more question, Donna. That sheet that you were reading from where you said what the actual accessible funds were, did we get that? Okay. Is it possible for me to get a copy of that?
Is that a breakdown of the funds and?
Yeah, yeah.
That 300,000?
What did she give you?
I think
I'll
so.
just reprint it tomorrow. What did she give you?
Anybody else with any other questions?
Yeah, she just gave you
I'll
that.
give them the balance sheet.
She just
Yeah.
circled.
Yeah, I'll get you it's a balance sheet. I'll get you that.
Again, thank you, and I hope to see you all come visit us in the library.
Well, thank you,
And if
folks,
you don't,
for
come
what
get a
you do.
library card.
Thank you for taking
4
that
days
job
into
on.
the job?
4 days. I got to make sure everyone's welcomed. Come. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your report.
There it is. More numbers. So Julie, you're on. This time it's our general fund budget.
I wish we were only up $7,000. So general fund, again, not a whole lot new here. Updated expenses through December 15th. Is one more payroll, one more warrant will be added to this. And of course, more revenue will be coming in as well. I did have a chance to meet with Ron, our auditor. We went over fund balances, making sure I was secure on where we are. I also discussed with him the spreadsheet that I had given, spreadsheets I had given you guys previously, of some things that we could kick out to other funds, one-time expenses that could be kicked out to other funds. Ron was very supportive. I had him review each one to just make sure I didn't miss anything. And again, I want to be clear that they are one-time. We don't want to do anything that's just going to spike 2024. So truly one-time things that would be 2023 only. He went through, he agreed 100% and agreed that this is the thing to be doing this year. He also has been encouraging all of his towns to take a good look at their ARPA funds, to use them in ways as we're proposing. It's a wonderful thought to think that we could use those ARPA funds for a brand new project or something along those lines, but right now people just need to be able to heat their homes. So anything that we can do to, that money is there. Again, it's not using all of it. It is using some of it for expenses that make sense, like the emergency services building and the town garage project, which were cost overruns directly related to COVID. So anyway, that, if you guys are in agreement, at the next meeting, we should have pretty close to final expenses in your first meeting in January, and I can show you a budget with these items removed
I think we as a board have, when we have talked about this in the past, agreed with your list.
Okay.
In the use of ARPA funds. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong from any board members, but I think that was the direction we were heading in, that
think
we were
that's-
approving.
That's the purpose of that money.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I feel so too, but it's not my money to spend,
I mean,
so.
the use of the money in this way is the best result for the taxpayer.
Right.
Is what it comes down to, as opposed to it, like you said, a new project or new spending, which is, I think it's kind of foolish at this point to be taking on anything like that.
We'd love to have a new rec
But-
facility, but we
But the
we
ARPA money
can't.
should go where it's going to help the taxpayer the
Exactly.
most on this.
Absolutely.
So did we have a discussion with the trustees of public funds yet about?
They're
using-
coming January 4th.
Okay,
They're coming to your January meeting.
okay, excellent. Thank you.
And at that meeting is where we need to, you
Make
know,
the decisions.
we need to discuss with them, you know, we want 16,000 for the cemetery shed expansion because we have equipment being stored outside. We want 8,000 for the cemetery tree maintenance for '23, and we want 8,000 for the cemetery tree maintenance that we expended in '22. That's a request that the select board needs to specifically make of them if you are in agreement with those purchases.
I mean, that's one of the few areas that we can request.
Correct.
Money from a fund that it's been growing for a long
Correct.
time. And we're not saying to use that fund just for whatever reason.
No.
That was specific to
To
those
cemetery
funds in
maintenance.
general. And it's
Correct.
not even eating into their capital.
No.
It's their profits still.
Yep.
I mean, they probably had a bad year also, but they've also had quite a run before that.
Absolutely.
Has increased it.
Absolutely.
There's still Chester, there are economic development funds and things too, aren't there?
We do have economic development funds. There's a policy around how that is spent.
yep.
Not to say that you can't go back and look at that. And there is certainly some language built into that policy when we adopted that several years ago that gives the town the ability to borrow from it. I was trying to come up with ways that wouldn't require us just to borrow, but to actually pay some things off and.
Well, when
be
we
done.
borrow money at the higher interest rates that are happening now, maybe if we borrow from ourselves,
Yep,
at least it would be for zero interest rates, you know.
that's certainly an
Money
option.
is there, it's not, we're not going to take it and spend it. We'll borrow, we'll put it back, but
at the same time, to Bill's point, how money markets are doing and everything else,
Yeah.
it may be better to let it sit at this point
Yep.
than touch it.
when they're down there.
Well, the expenses for 2024 in the capital plan, there's only, I think, 2 items that are being proposed to purchase in 2024 or 2023 with payment in 2024. And then, of course, there is the paving bond. But all of those items, one of the things that Ron and I have talked about, and I have had conversations with the bond bank about, is I think borrowing for 2023 I'm going to compile it all into one bond, because bonds are getting much better rates than just going to People's Bank. So we'll be able to save some money on that as well. It's just more of an application process, but. So if you guys are in agreement with this stuff, the next budget that I show you should have final expenses for 2022. We'll make these adjustments in these journal entries for 2022 expenses, and I will remove these items from 23 and provide a budget at that point.
I mean, I don't hear of any disagreement with anything on the list from any board members. I mean,
No, good.
what we're going.
Arnie, it's Heather.
Go ahead.
And it may be off, well, I don't think it's off subject. The ARPA funds, we did have a lot of community input about what we wanted to use it on. I understand that was done before we knew any of these numbers, but there was also the solar, and we only had a limited amount of time to, work with them about that. Where is that? And is that something we can talk about now, or should I just ask for that to be put on the next agenda?
So I'm waiting on a response back. Heather, finally, all the documentation has been assembled. They helped tremendous with some of that, and then we got Greenbacker to finally send over the final documentation that Gamble needed, the appraiser that we had hired. They now have everything. And the timeline on the email that I got was that they would have a response to us of an appraisal by mid-January. So as soon as I have that appraisal, then that will come back to you to look at. It will also go to Greenbacker. And then true negotiation could begin if we have an interest at that point.
And even with all this use of ARPA funds, there is still a balance.
There's still about almost 500,000.
So we're
Thank you. So that would be good to know, thank you for working on that.
You're welcome.
All set. Any other questions on the general fund? Signed loan documents.
Okay.
I can pop in tomorrow if you need it to be done.
I probably am okay. I've got 3 here, Heather.
Okay.
Up to you. So,
What are these loan documents?
so these loan documents are much later than normal. When we did, the capital plan was approved for 2022. The voters approved the purchase of the paving of the highway garage, and the balance, our match to the Popple Dungeon Bridge project. I don't borrow the money until we actually need it. So we're at the end of the year. Now is when we need it. The projects have finished. I just don't want the interest repayment to start. I don't want to be borrow money and then just put it in our bank account to sit on it. So that's what this is for.
Borrow it when we need it.
And the voters approved 280,000. Some of this came in under budget, so we only had to borrow 210.
Nice.
That's the other advantage to waiting until we actually.
Excellent.
So you've got your note.
We need
And
motions on this. I
you
believe,
do.
don't
You
we?
need, you've got your note and your
There's
resolution.
3 different motions?
Yes. Okay.
The first motion is to approve the Town of Chester capital improvement note dated December 29, 2022, for the amount of $210,000.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Ben's the motion and Lee Gustafson's the second. Any discussion on it? All those in favor of approving that motion, please say aye.
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 Thank you.
That was the least discussion we've had on a motion all night.
Did you do the other documents? They're all there together,
they're
Arnie.
all there.
They're all there together.
let me
Sorry,
have
I
the next one. Sorry.
should have given to you one at a time.
The next is a motion for the Town of Chester Resolution Capital Improvement Borrowing for the amount of $210,000 and an interest rate of 4.25.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
And Ben's the motion and Lee Gustafson's the second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the next one is a Town of Chester tax certificate capital improvement borrowing for that same amount, $210,000.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Lee Gustafson's the motion and Lee Dakin's the second. Any further discussion on it? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All set? Next item on the agenda is our health officer reappointment, and I believe that's Amanda Silva.
That's Amanda Silva, yep. And then if you could just authorize Arnie to sign the recommendation form. Amanda's filling it out, and I forgot to get it from her this afternoon, I'm sorry.
So we need a motion to reappoint Amanda Silva as our health officer and authorizing myself, board chair, to sign the document.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Give it to Heather.
Heather's the motion.
Oh, thank you, Lee.
Lee Dakins, the second.
Want you to feel included.
Oh, thank you.
Any further discussion? It's a year-to-year thing?
It's the health officer is a 3-year appointment.
3-year term?
Yep.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
And I just have to say, hallelujah that we have her doing this.
Yes, she's very good at it. It's not her favorite task, but she's very good at it.
I think we have an amazing emergency services.
Yes, we do
setup
have an
there with
emergency
the
public
police, the
safety.
fire, and the ambulance.
Yes,
to
we
where
do.
Maybe we always had it, but it just shines you so much better with the building and the people and the atmosphere and the whole setup is just so professional. It's so well done. And they're really amazing guys and women. New business, future agenda items. I guess the advisory committee that'll be the second week in.
I have it for the 18th, but if you want to
no.
discuss before no,
18th 's
it's up to
fine.
you. I had on the 4th, the budgets, of course, trustee of public funds is coming, and hopefully the union agreement.
Yep.
The 18th, you'll set your budget. You'll review the town warning. And the local cannabis control committee is going to do an update
Yep.
for you.
Yep.
And then the police advisory panel discussion. And then on the 20th, there is a special meeting on the 20th, just for the purpose of signing the warning. We can't sign it until the 20th.
Yeah, the update from the Cannabis Commission, actually, there's been some activity there. I guess they had the closing on the building, that they're going to be opening up a retail cannabis establishment.
My understanding is the building was purchased, yeah.
So that permit's not even been submitted to the state?
Hasn't been submitted yet?
No,
No.
No.
but my
It's in the
understanding is.
works?
You know as much as I do.
We know that there is an intent to file one. I don't know if
Yeah,
it has
there's-
actually been filed yet.
The planning commission or the zoning
PRB.
administrator has let the Cannabis Control Commission know that a permit was requested, and then it goes to the state, and then when we hear back from them, that's when it's official.
All right, thanks, Lee. Anybody have anything else for future agenda items?
It's not a future agenda item, but just kind of concept. There is really bad weather coming in on Thursday night and Friday, and people should be prepared to be without power and potential severe flooding.
Yep.
So parts of the state, they're talking about 60, 70 mile an hour sustained winds and gusts over 100. So
Wow.
With 2 inches of water, too.
2 to 3 inches. I think our area is 2 to 3 inches of rain plus 60 degrees, so snow melt. Plus, you think about all the trees that are already down in the rivers from the last storm, and it's also supposed to get down to like 8, 10 degrees.
The night after, yeah.
Super fast. So,
Happy holidays.
Yahoo.
Amazing.
but
That's too bad.
be prepared to be without power, and so.
May I make a comment? And maybe it's been made, but
Lee.
I want to thank our crew in the emergency public safety building for doing the fabulous job that they did helping people who were without power. This is going back a week or two. Without power during the horrific storm that we had. So I was so thankful to hear that they were able to keep some people safe and warm and fed and dry. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Anybody else for future agenda items? If not, I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 And we'll go rolling right into our water and wastewater commissioners meeting.
Request permission to use the bathroom.
All right, we'll give it a couple of minutes and then we'll have the meeting.
Can I have the
warrants.
Please.
Oh, we got some big ones.
Yeah, that's the new one.
You don't want to stay for the
Recording stopped.
Sewer and Water Department? You sure?
So you should give me your
Put you
email
on an
address
email
so that I
list.
can email it to you. What is that? What is?
You can send it to editor@vermont.journal.
Oh,